So hello everybody and welcome to our September edition of Tea and Tarot. And I just realized I left my teacup upstairs, but that's fine, I'll drink it after. I'm going to be talking a lot today anyway. We have some really exciting things going on today. Number one, we're outside at the Sacred Well for one of probably our last times that it'll be okay to be outside for this winter. So we're enjoying it. And I also have a live studio audience today. Christine is over here and Laura, and they've taken the art of tarot with me in the past. Yeah, so they've taken the art of tarot with me, and they live locally, so they're here today, and I thought it would be really exciting to have them because then we can pass around the cards from the Pistis Sophia Tarot deck, which comes out tomorrow on the 28th. I got an advanced copy of this deck from the publisher so that I could do a review, and I have to say, people contact me from time to time asking me if I'd like to review products, and sometimes I want to and sometimes I don't want to. It's a sensitive world. Reviewing everyone's taste is so subjective, but I jumped at the chance to review this deck because it's been a long time coming. I'm friends with Nick Phillips, one of the creators of this deck, and so now we're beginning the unboxing. So the deck, when it comes in a beautiful box. It's wrapped in plastic. I took the plastic off before we began so that I wouldn't have a lot of unwarranted crinkling. But when you open it, it opens this way. And there's a book which was written by author Kim Huggens about the interpretations of the tarot. And then inside are the cards which were illustrated by Nick Phillips. And the cards are gilded, so the edge is gold. I love that. This is a majors only deck. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look through the cards and look at the meanings for the first portion of the class. And then for the second portion of the class, we're going to actually do a reading with these cards. And we're going to do a reading with these cards that will allow us to do a mixture where we use the majors from the Pistis Sophia Tarot along with the minors from this deck. And I want to just briefly mention this deck. This is called the Original Tarot. It is a Rider-Waite deck, but it's unlike the standard American Rider-Waite. So the standard American Rider-Waite deck that you get at bookstores typically has on the back something that looks like blue plaid. You might recognize that blue plaid background from a classical Rider-Waite deck. But what I love about this deck, the Original Tarot, is this quality of stock is like really good card stock quality. It's got a woven texture. The images are your standard Pamela Coleman Smith illustrations as she envisioned with Arthur Waite. And the back has this pretty mandala on it. So just thought I'd share that with you because we're going to be using both, and a couple of you in our discussion group mentioned that you're diehard Rider-Waite users. So we'll be back to the Original Tarot and we'll use it in our divination later. And I just wanted to mention that it exists, and I do have copies of it in the store if you want to buy one. But the Pistis Sophia comes out tomorrow. So where do we get this language? I'm just going to read you a little bit about this name, Pistis Sophia. The Pistis Sophia is a Gnostic text that was discovered in 1773. It was possibly written between the 3rd and 4th centuries CE. The existing manuscript, which some scholars place in the late 4th century, relates to one Gnostic group's teachings of the transfigured Jesus to the assembled disciples that include his mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and Martha. So this is, the Pistis Sophia is a story of after the resurrection, when Jesus is hanging out with all of the women in his life who believed in him. And this deck, which, as I mentioned before, was the product of Nick Phillips and Kim Huggens, is the companion deck to another deck that they co-created called the Soul Invictus deck, which is the God Tarot. So this is their Goddess Tarot to their earlier work, which was the Soul Invictus God Tarot. It's an exciting thing for us to take the journey through these cards today, right now, on the eve of their release. We are going to go through today and we're going to look at each of these cards. Pat, I'll show them to you. We'll pass them around. And in some cases, I will open the book and maybe just read aloud a couple of words so that you can get a sample of what the book is saying. So the very first card in the deck, in this Majors Only deck, the Fool, is Eve. And in this card, Eve has the serpent wrapped around the back of her body, and she is reaching for the apple. So you can see Eve here. And this is a great depiction, I think, for a Fool card. I'll send it around so you can have a look. I think it's a great depiction for a Fool card because it really conjures the moment of decision. It's that moment where Eve is like, on the edge of her decision to liberate herself, to find out for herself what's going on in her world. And so she's reaching for that apple. She's got an eager look on her face. It's a kind of a positive, uplifting look. And the serpent is looking with her at the apple. So Eve, at the moment before the leap, which in a traditional tarot, the Fool is often depicted just stepping off that cliff into the unknown. Here's Eve, interestingly, stepping off the cliff into the known, right? Because she was sampling from the tree of knowledge. So for her, going into the unknown was to go into the known that she didn't have access to before. So that's the first one. Our second card, boom, right out of the gate. We've got the Magician, and it is Isis. And I could not be happier with what I see in this Isis card. First off, it's depicting the winged Isis with the solar headdress, but the Egyptian hieroglyphic for the throne is here with her. The wasp, the staff of authority and power, is with her. The elemental alchemical symbols in respective colors, yellow for air, red for fire, blue for water, and green for earth, are all here, which resonates with her alchemical significance. She's got the sun above her and the moon below her, showing her cosmic nature. And finally, she has the Chariot, the Isian knot, as a prominent symbol. The Chariot was a special type of knot. It is a special type of knot that it confers everything from protection and health to fertility and good fortune when it appears in relation to Isis. So now have a look at the Isis Magician card. And I have often interpreted the Magician card in the traditional tarot with that alchemical sensibility. So it makes me really happy to see these alchemical symbols, Sol et Luna, the elemental, symbols here, and of course to see her brilliant wings unfurled with beautiful color. So there's the first goddess that contributes to this Sophian line that is the story of this deck. And through this deck, we're going to see a lot of different goddesses and saints mixed in, because in the Gnostic tradition, it follows kind of a post, sort of the post-resurrection story, but it is highly focused on the divine feminine, or the goddess, as I prefer to say. So I can totally understand why Isis, as a goddess of alchemy, would make perfect sense as the magician. So now let's move on to the High Priestess. And if anybody, as you're going along, has anything you want to say about some of the cards, images, or symbols that you see, don't hesitate to type them into the chat, and then you can come on and we can discuss a little more. The High Priestess in this deck is Sophia, and she is interestingly depicted with angelic white wings and a blue veil. She is holding let's see what she's holding, because I don't know. It could be a stone, or it could be a bannock. Let's find out. So going to the interpretation of Sophia. She is within a 7-pillared temple. Sophia, wisdom, hi, come sit here, is seated upon the throne of the world. She wears white to connote purity, but the veil that covers her head and eyes is blue and is crowned with stars. The light from her halo illuminates her wings, and she holds out communion bread, so it is a bannock, in an offering of spiritual nourishment. Upon her lap is a closed holy text, and not quite there is the glowing communion chalice or grail. A purple veil is suspended behind her, covering the entrance or exit to the temple, and in her small, mysterious smile is complete silence and the promise of mystery. It's said here that Sophia is the world soul and the mother of the creator of the world. And in Proverbs chapter 8, verses 10 through 17, here are the words of Sophia. And I'll pass this card around so you can take a look. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and ignorance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me, kings reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me, princes govern and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. Now, one of the interesting features in this card is that it draws on a very classical trope, which is this purple veil behind her. She's wearing the blue veil of being crowned with stars, but the purple veil behind her, which connotes the entrance into the sanctum, in the temple at Delphi, the oracle wore a purple veil. So even though this is arising from within the later Gnostic tradition, it still has a nod to that purple veil of the original wisdom of the oracle at Delphi, and has this quote that is amazing on the card. It says, I am the hearing which is attainable to everyone, and the speech which cannot be grasped. I am the mute who does not speak, and great is my multitude of words. And this may be a quote from the Thunder Perfect Mind, which is a text often associated with the Black Madonna and Sophia. I'm curious, one other thing in this card, to see if they describe it. Yes, it is from the Thunder Perfect Mind from the Nag Hammadi Library. And it tells, you know, where they got the quote that's on the card, but then there's a further quote, and I'll just read it here, because I feel that the High Priestess card brings together so many different contradictions. She's fully human and fully divine. She's completely possessed by the divine, and yet she is completely aware and in her own center. And some of these quotes from the Nag Hammadi Library's Thunder Perfect Mind really point to this. I am the silence that is incomprehensible, and the idea whose remembrance is frequent. I am the voice whose sound is manifold, and the word whose appearance is multiple. I am control and the uncontrollable. I am the union and the dissolution. I am the one below, and they come up to me. I am the judgment and the acquittal. I am sinless, and the root of sin derives from me. So she acknowledges the contradiction inherent in trying to be in the world of spirit and the world of form at the same time. So I feel like this is, again, a very interesting card, really valuable for us to look into as we go forward. Let's see who else is here to show up. So the Empress, many of us know the Empress to be associated with nature, fertility, creativity. For the Empress, we have the Aztec goddess Xochiquetzal, and she has an infant at her breast, and she's pregnant. She's wearing the colorful headdress that looks like it might be a bird headdress. So let's have a look here and see. Yes, the plumed bird. Xochiquetzal is the quetzal bird, which is actually like the sacred bird of the Mayan culture as well, and sacred in Guatemala. The feather of the quetzal is said to be a medicinal feather. Only a Mayan Aki, somebody who has a proper relation and training, is supposed to be able to wield the feather of the quetzal. A quetzal bird ever placed in a cage will die. They must be free. So there's an element in this card of the Empress needing to be free and wild and self-determined. And so, very powerful image. I'll send that one around. And we're going to kind of go quickly through some of these so that we have time to do everything. So going into the Emperor, interestingly, they don't call it the Emperor, they call it the construct. So the construct is Nuwa, and let's find, and it's a serpent woman. So let's find out about Nuwa. And they've listed here, this is a Chinese deity, primordial. Says, in a time of chaos, when the earth has been flooded and fires have raged across its surface, I'm getting chills. When the earth has been flooded and fires have raged across its surface, caused by warring gods seeking dominion, the snake-tailed goddess of order, Nuwa, puts an end to the chaos by establishing the four pillars of the world and reaffixing the heavens in their proper place, filling the holes created by the damage with 5 magical colored stones. Her dominion is vast, and her role is crucial for the continuation of the order of the earth. So I so understand why in a goddess tarot, rather than having the emperor as the construct, the masculine as the savior or rescuer, they've instead assigned this goddess Nuwa, primordial creatrix and restorer of order, into the role of emperor. It really does a good job, I think, of destabilizing a more patriarchal view of the emperor, which will be about male rule and law, and really returns and restores us to natural order. And the other thing that I like about it is that, you know, they certainly could have chosen any number of different goddesses who are depicted as masculine in some way for this card, but they chose not to. And I feel like this is really important to the destabilization of our outmoded gendered ideals of authority as somehow being masculine. Order and authority are not inherently male in any way. So to have a goddess who restores order is really powerful. So Nuwa and her 5 colored stones looks like the gems of the Infinity Gauntlet. I'm sort of joking, but not joking. I wish we had an Infinity Gauntlet right about now, don't you? So I'll send Nuwa around as the emperor, and I'm thinking about order in a home. Who creates that? Right, order in the home. Who creates that? Let's just be real. That's right. So now we get to move into the Hierophant, and I've been really dying to know who would be the Hierophant card in this deck, because I am a Hierophant. That's my numerological life path card. So it is Mary Magdalene, and it's showing sort of 3 forms here. I'm curious. I've never seen Mary Magdalene depicted in a triple form like this. So this is new to me. I want to see what they have to say about this. And it's saying it's the 3 Marys are in the boat on the shores of Saint-Marie de la Mer. And this is where Saint-Marie de la Mer is where they honor the Sara la Kali Black Madonna every year. They process the statue out to the ocean, and everyone gets in the ocean with her. And when her pilgrims go to visit her and ask for miracles, they lift up the statue's many multicolored skirts and crawl under her skirt for their miracle. So I feel like there's something really powerful about going like literally to the Holy of Holies that's depicted in the legends of Sara la Kali. Now Saint Mary Magdalene is here with Mary Salome, who is clothed in red, leaning out one side of the boat, and Mary of Jacob holding an alabaster jar is on the other side. And then Mary the Magdalene is in the center in the green dress, holding the book of wisdom and bearing a key to the mysteries upon her breast. Her right hand is held up in benediction, and holy light radiates from her. Together, they have brought their faith and the teachings of their teacher to these shores, and this is going to be their next step in their journey. A great deal has been discussed about Mary Magdalene over the years. She's been written about as the sacred harlot, the woman of the alabaster jar. Historically speaking, there's no evidence whatsoever that Mary Magdalene ever engaged in sex work. Actually, that's a complete reversal of her status. Historically speaking, she was actually a fairly wealthy woman of means and education, potentially educated as a priestess in the Temple of Isis before she converted to Christianity, or to the religion of the Nazarene, and which was Judaism, but mystical, sort of Jesus's own version of Judaism.
That's right.
Mystical. Well, I love this because we're all just each of us a religion of one. what we believe, you know. So it goes on in the book here to talk in great detail. I won't have time today to get into all of it, but in great detail, it talks about how this card relates, as Mary Magdalene is the physical embodiment of the wisdom of Sophia. So how the high priestess is Sophia, it's talking about it here. I won't be able to read the whole thing, but you can get it and read it. It talks about how she brings the Sophia into form. So the Sophia is the formless in the high priestess, but the Hierophant is the sacred in form. So I'll send her around and then we'll bring her back to the screen for you. And it goes on, it talks about how it's the Merovingian period that is where they start to try to assign Mary Magdalene the role of repentant prostitute. That is a reputation that remains to this day, but that actually before this she was more like a prophetess and visionary and educated woman who made a very strong case for herself to follow the teachings of Jesus. And it says she asked 39 of the 42 questions that were posed to Jesus to elicit wisdom. So she acted as a co-teacher. So this is a really different depiction of Mary Magdalene than we're mostly taught, which is mostly popular, which I'm very glad to see, because this is how the disinformation is dispelled. And here she is in her green dress with the key around her neck and the other two Marys at her side. And they're in their boat landing on the beach of Saint-Marie de la Mer. Go ahead, Sativa. Oh, yes. Oh, I see. You're doing the gesture. Yes, the gesture of benediction. Beautiful. Okay. So now we move into a whole new area. For the lovers, instead of it being called the lovers with a traditional depiction of a man and a woman in an embrace, instead, we've got a very different kind of love being depicted here. It's called the sisters. They've named number 6 the sisters, and they chose the Wawilak sisters. I believe this is from Aboriginal mythology. So I'm just going to confirm. Yeah, this is from the Yolngu Australian Aboriginal mythos. And the Wawilak sisters are seated facing each other, singing the menstruation songs, the water songs, and the sisters' songs. And as they sing, their voices join together and their menstrual flow joins together. And they're united in their purpose to prevent Yurlungur, the rainbow serpent, from swallowing them, having smelled their blood. So they're taking refuge in each other in this card. So we can see in this card, they've painted their bodies, they've laced their feet together, the blood is flowing out of their wombs. And interestingly, even though they're depicted in human form, beneath them are these like spirit mermaid tails that are entwined, and their blood flows up and creates almost like a noose around the neck of the serpent that is poised to attack them. And it sort of seems like a message is saying here, if we don't have each other, we don't have anything to protect us. And that our sisterhood protects us, which I love. Yeah. Interesting that the blood is, rising almost like smoke. Exactly. And that the serpent is coiled all around them, but it kind of ends up making a yoni shape behind them. So I'm going to send this one around. Really beautiful card. And I love that menstrual mysteries got included in this. And I love the recasting of the lovers as the sisters, because the lovers card, as many of you know, is not about only physical sexual love. It's certainly not only about heteronormative love. it's a, you know, and I've seen it handled different ways in different decks. Some decks come with a variety of lovers cards, so you can pick like 2 men, 2 women, a man and a woman. Some decks come with the lovers card where it looks like it's more like a hermaphrodite card where there's a figure that's got both. But the traditional depiction is usually a man and a woman in a naked embrace. And I'm really loving that this card invites us to think differently about love, about the primacy of sisterhood as the original love, and the love that gives us the basis of safety into which we can explore other types of love. Okay, so the Chariot is Nike, the victorious one, and she's got she's got the dark horse and the light horse, and she's holding the laurel wreath of victory in a triumphant hand above her. She's radiating. Looks like there's all kinds of like wreaths and garlands and flowers being thrown at her chariot. She's got her harp around her back, and she's riding to victory. Nike seems like a very appropriate choice for a victorious chariot. It's like the just do it card. Now I'm going to think of that forever. When I see that Nike card, I'll think, just do it.
Just take the horses out.
Just take the horses out and go do the thing. All right, so I've been curious to see what would happen in this deck if it would follow the convention where, you know, the strength card is 8 and the justice is 11, or if it would follow the Thoth convention where the strength card is 11 and the justice is 8. This deck, the strength card is number 8, so it's more of a Rider-Waite numeric system. And it's Saint Perpetua, the enduring. And she's depicted here in prayer. Her head is bowed. She's got her hands folded. And you see this like beautiful, you know, vision. But then beneath her, it shows kind of a second version of her. I'm going to bring it really close. And she's standing on top of some kind of a devil. So there's a triumph in this. It's not the same gentle strength as the woman holding open the jaws of the lion, but it's still a very gentle strength in that she's in this peaceful, prayerful mode, and she's standing on top of this conquered devil that has a very classic long tongue and pointy tail. I'll send this around and let's just quickly look up what they have to say about Perpetua here. Wow. This is such a great deck. Oh, I'm so excited about it. I've really, you know, been hungering for a new goddess deck. Of course, you know me, I have every goddess deck already that I can possibly find, but I love this new one. It says here, boom, right here, the devil has fallen dead in the dust of the Roman arena beneath the feet of Saint Perpetua. Strength. She's casting her eyes downward as would befit a wealthy Roman Matrona before the dust has even settled. So she vanquished this devil. Yeah, I'm curious, what's up in this left corner? There's a hand and there's something that looks like a yellow, aha. To mark her victory, the hand of God descends, holding out a branch with golden apples upon it. The gentle woman has overcome the fierce bestial force that holds all humans back from paradise. So Saint Perpetua. And then for our next card, number 9, the Hermit. Here's my girl.
Yeah.
Guan Yin is the Hermit. And here we are at Guan Yin's shrine right now. This card shows all these hands reaching up in kind of a desperation. And Guanyin is standing on top of an outcropping, and she's holding out her hands, and from her hands are flowing streamers and butterflies of transformation. And I think, you know, this card for me speaks to what we do on the cushion and how important what we do on the cushion is. It's tricky. We want to take genuine beneficial action. I think most of us as activists who want social change and want a better outcome for all beings. And then sometimes each of us feels helpless in the face of what we're up against. And if we can't go to the cushion to pray, we can start to, you know, and to send out energy. We can start to feel depressed and useless and powerless and in despair. I also know we have to take it beyond the cushion, but even when we take it beyond the cushion, we don't always have a guarantee that anything will happen. So I really like that they've placed Guanyin, who transforms from the cushion as the Hermit. And I have a comment. Let's see what someone said here. Aha, Sativa says, my life card, the Hermit, so perfect that it's Guanyin. I love this deck so much already. Oh, me too, Sativa. Yeah, and this is a beautiful depiction of Guanyin. I love her butterflies and her streamers and her halo. And she is just hearing the cries of the world in this card. The next card is the Wheel of Fortune. So now we're at number 10, the Moira. And the Moira are the fates. The three Moira are Clothos, Lachesis, and Atropos. The spinner, the weaver, and the cutter. And so it shows all around them are these webs, and in these webs are all these different trinkets, a ring, poker chips, a skull, a clock, dice, indicating that, you know, really it's all just a gamble in this field of time, and we don't know how much time we have. But then it shows the three fates, and there's a baby in the middle of them, and one of them is spinning, and the other has her ruler, and she's measuring the infant with the ruler, and as she's measuring the thread for the lifespan. And then the other one has got her piece, and she's ready to cut it. So that you see in this card, and I hope you can see the little baby. The baby is sort of faint and held within the light at the center of the card, and then you see this one is Atropos, the cutter. So you can see, there they are, and then here are the symbols up above with the clock, the dice, the skulls, the ring, the crapshoot of choosing a body in this realm, in this time. So they are the ones who control our fate, and I think that makes a really great choice for it's a very understandable choice for the Wheel of Fortune. So looking at this next card is Justice. And when I have to admit, when I first looked at the card, okay, so this is number 11, I thought it was Kali because she's kind of got these blue eyes, but actually it's Ma'at, the balancer, and it shows here her scales with Ma'at's feather and then a human heart, echoing the mythos that when you die and you visit the underworld and you're going to determine where you go next, your heart has to be as light as a feather. And I feel like it's so interesting, because when I think about how would my heart be as light as a feather, there's really only two ways my heart would be as light as a feather at the end of my life. One would be if I had accomplished an epic feat of spiritual bypassing, and the other would be if my soul were truly clean. Of the two, I think I'm going to opt for the second. The Justice card says the real justice is what we face within us. And I think, again, in a time when our justice system has been quite severely compromised, not only in this country, but worldwide, remembering that Ma'at has her own way of administering justice, which isn't necessarily based on punishment, but on discernment, is important. We live in a field where justice means punishment, but the reality of justice is that nothing requires punishment if we've exercised discernment. And punishment is not the aim of justice. Discernment is. So I think this makes a very powerful statement. I want to just see if they've had something to say about that in here. Curious if we feel the same way. Yeah. Yes, she's wearing, it says she wears the white ostrich feather sacred to her upon her brow, and that the less anthropomorphized version of her in the scales also has that same white ostrich feather. So you see it in both places in the card. I'll hold it up again so you can see. Here's the ostrich feather at my finger, but then the ostrich feather is also there at the tip top, tucked into her headband at her brow. Oh my gosh, we have a tarot kitty. I'm obsessed. Hi, Lilith's kitty. Okay, so Ma'at, justice as discernment, not as punishment. So now we're moving into number 12. So we've got here the hanged one, and they don't call this the hanged man in this deck. They call this card the mystic, and it's Saint Teresa of Avila, or Avila. And there's a quote on this card that says, "Lord, either let me suffer or let me die." And she's being struck in the chest by this light-filled wand, and she's suspended. It's actually a really shocking image. You can see a tear rolling down her cheek. She's in a tortured ecstasy. So a very kind of shocking depiction of this tortured ecstasy where this light is entering her through this wand. Let's have a look and find out what this means. Teresa of Avila was a mystic. She was a visionary. She was quite magical.
She wrote the stages.
Oh, yeah.
Spirituality as houses.
There's a okay, so so Anka's saying she wrote the stages of spirituality as houses, and Christine is sharing that there's a statue in the Vatican of Teresa of Avila in that kind of a tortured ecstasy. So let's find out about the tortured ecstasy of Teresa.
Mansions.
The mansions. It says here, she called it she said the soul was a diamond castle with 7 mansions, each of which represented a stage in the process of the soul's union with the divine through contemplative prayer. And she wrote these works as guides for the nuns of the Carmelite order. She is perhaps most well known for her description of a vision she experienced that vividly encapsulates the idea of spiritual suffering, spiritual rapture, and spiritual union with the divine. She described a beautiful angel with a countenance of flashing fire. So here's a translation. In his hands I saw a long golden spear, and at the end of the iron tip I seemed to see a point of fire. With this, he seemed to pierce my heart several times so that it penetrated to my entrails. When he drew it out, I thought he was drawing them out, and it left me completely afire, with a great love for God. The pain was so sharp that it made me utter several moans, and so excessive was the sweetness caused me by this intense pain that one can never wish to lose it, nor will one's soul be content with anything less than God. It is not bodily pain, but spiritual, though the body has a share in it. And here's the picture at the Vatican. Thank you. Oh, yeah, at St. Peter's. Sorry. So here's the image of this angelic visitation that's in the St. Peter's.
The ecstasy of Teresa.
The ecstasy of St. Teresa. And then when you see it in the card, she's got it. She doesn't have the angel there with her, but she's alone, but she's clearly being visited by a presence. This is actually, I have to say, you know, whatever our witchy feminist sensibilities are, that we're like, what? No orgasms and chocolate? That's not my religion. You know, still, I do think that there is this amazing quality of suffering that teaches us a very valuable lesson about spirit. And certainly for my own part, and maybe others have had this experience too, it's really been in some of my worst times that I really knew that the divine was with me in a very profound way. You know, it's easy to sort of like be having a great time and forget that spiritual rapture because we're so wrapped up in the physical rapture. But to go through exquisite suffering and to know that you're visited by the divine amidst that, and that that pain is part of your journey, it's very difficult to swallow, but it's very valuable if we can. And I think, you know, Teresa of Avila, you know, really speaks to that in her mythos. And as much as I myself don't think any of us would joyfully choose suffering, I think when suffering happens, we can either resist it or find a way to make some meaning of it. And she did choose to make meaning of it. So there's a beauty in this. So now let's find out. This is a big one. Who's the death card? Izanami is the death card. And so I don't have familiarity with Izanami. If any of you do, please type in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and venture into the book to find out who is Izanami. This isn't a name that's super familiar to me. Okay, here we are. Japanese goddess. In the depths of Yomi, the dark underworld, the mythical couple who created the 8 great islands of Japan are reunited beyond death. Her pale flesh giving way to decay, her wild hair unbound. Izanami no Mikoto. Oh, I've heard this name. Izanami no Mikoto, the female who invites, is illuminated by Izanagi no Mikoto, whose impatience to see his dead wife causes him to go against her wishes not to look at her. Upon being faced with the truth of her death and the ghastly visage of her rotting flesh, now mother only to maggots and the 8 thunder deities, he is terrified and he runs away from her. Izanami chases him through Yomi, sending the warriors and female fearsome spirits of the underworld after him. Izanagi's refusal to accept death and the changes that it brings forever parts him from his wife, yet establishes a new life at every turn. It goes through and talks about where they found the stories of Izanami no Mikoto. It was in the Kojiki, the Records of Ancient Matters, and the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, that we find the 2 earliest chronicles of this story. And it talks about how Izanami died. She was fatally wounded while giving birth to another deity. As she lay on her deathbed, more deities were born from her vomit, from her urine, from her feces, from her fluids. And after she died, she was buried on Mount Hiba. Hiba means cedar in Japanese. So cedar having some connotation with death here, potentially. It says here that then he sought his wife, and he actually went to the underworld to bring her back, but he couldn't bring her back, and that then he had to face the fact that she couldn't come back. So there is the kind of disappointment and the dissolution and the finality and the confrontation of all the things that in the West especially we tend to fail to confront about death. And it's unfortunate that we can't learn to grieve better than we do, because our greatest suffering and grief comes from our resistance to the grief and to the reality. It's not the grief that causes us to suffer, it's our resistance to the grief that causes us to suffer. The grief itself is a healthy, natural process of loss and coping. And so I feel like this is a very poignant way to describe the death card. Certainly a vivid tale. They did not hold back anything in choosing the story for this card. It's not a kind of a pretty smoothed over butterfly death transformation, or like a easygoing, oh, she just became one with the light. No, this one's talking about feces and blood and urine and vomit and maggots and the underworld and the decay of the flesh, and it confronts it, and it's forcing us to confront it too. So the death card in this deck really hammering home there's not really a pretty way to get past it. But the beauty that emerges after that is really powerful. It says, once Izanagi exited Yomi, the underworld, he blocked the entrance with a boulder, and so that she couldn't come and take over the world of the living. And it says here, the two made a promise to each other. She would kill 1,000 people of his land every day, and he would cause 1,500 new people to be born every day. So the divine couple of creation then established the interplay between life and death, creation and destruction, and made way for the multitude of transitions in between. And then it goes on and it talks about how these are the two figures who create life and death in Japanese mythos, but also that they create the 8 great islands of Japan. And so many of their stories are about creation and destruction, because the islands of Japan are created through what we might consider destruction, earthly processes that cause Earth to rise up, volcanic processes that cause Earth to be born amidst fire and difficulties. So there's definitely an unflinching look at life, death, and the beyond in this card. So, after that, where do we go? We go to the Temperance card. Now, interestingly, we talked in the Magician card about Isis and the alchemical symbology in her card, but this card they've renamed not Temperance, but Alchemy. And it shows 2 people sitting. They're not specifically gendered, but one is holding a cup and one is holding a blade. So those are symbols of female and male. They're sitting at the base of Caradwyn's cauldron. So the goddess of this Temperance card is Caradwyn. And it shows the cauldron is being stirred. And the way that the card is arranged, you see the upper part of Caradwyn's body and her beautiful thick braids. But then it's almost as if the cauldron turns into her womb and comes to a point, and there are drops coming out and falling down on these symbols on the side of the cauldron, and these 2 individuals are receiving here. So a close-up of Caradwyn's beautiful face I think the face and hair and upper body are just gorgeous. And then the cauldron itself becomes like her womb pouring out, and then the figures at the bottom are there. And rather than the Temperance card, which often has the angelic figure with the two cups pouring back and forth, you have these other two individuals representing